So, if you're subscribed to this channel, you've heard of Mass Effect 1, 2, 3 and Andromeda, but you may not have heard of this sort of lost, cancelled iOS game Mass Effect Galaxy. And today I'll be going over what the game was, and what happened to it, and how it was eventually lost in time and is now currently unplayable for most people.
Lockhart QT.
If you don't know what Mass Effect Galaxy, it was a Mass Effect spin-off game developed for iOS mobile devices being iPhones and iPod Touches. The game sported a more stylised cartoonish art style than the original trilogy games and was a top-down shooter opposed to a third-person shooter. Mass Effect Galaxy uses mobile devices, accelerometer and touchscreen functions within its gameplay. The story also focused on Jacob Taylor and Miranda Lawson, who appear together obviously in Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect Galaxy was released for iOS devices on June 22nd, 2009, but sadly as of February 2012, Mass Effect Galaxy was no longer available through the iOS App Store. However, it was still available for download if you had already purchased it, meaning that there is still footage available online, and I'll be using it in terms of this video. By the way, gameplay that you see on screen throughout this video has been gathered from the Mass Effect community, as I'm just unable to play this game myself, and the authors/content creators links and names will be shown throughout as well as in the description. In terms of story, the original synopsis reads as follows. The Mass Effect universe has landed on the iPhone and iPod Touch gaming platforms. Tales of human courage and individual human achievement resound throughout the galaxy. Here is your opportunity to play the story of Jacob Taylor, a new character in Mass Effect 2, a biotic-powered super soldier who stumbles across a plot to terrorize civilization's greatest beacon of hope. Can you prevent a heinous attack that threatens to knock humanity off the galactic stage? So, as you can see from the story, the game focuses on Jacob Taylor before the events of Mass Effect 2. The plot of the main game is as follows in terms of setup. Sometime prior to Jacob Taylor's introduction to Cerberus in 2183, galactic tension is rising due to Batarian Ambassador Jaffa Mon's arrangement of a meeting with the Citadel Council, with the intention of negotiating a peace between the Batarians and the Alliance. Jacob Taylor, a biotic soldier, is on vacation aboard the passenger liner I'm gonna really butcher this, Actorian Jade, when the ship is attacked by Batarian terrorists. Jacob grabs his assault rifle retained from his former job as an Alliance Marine, and a battle begins which will lead him to fight an unknown terrorist threat. Next up we go to combat. Mass Effect Galaxy is a top-down shooter where the player takes control of Jacob Taylor, armed with a powerful arsenal as well as a variety of biotic and tech powers inspired and sort of taken from the original Mass Effect. Due to the limitations of the game only being available for iOS devices, touchscreen controls were implemented and were used to aim weapons, deploy abilities whilst in combat. The combat of Mass Effect Galaxy consists of moving your character around by tilting the device and then tapping on the characters to lock onto them, essentially like you would in most touchscreen games. You fire automatically, but you can also use your abilities on the right hand side of the screen by tapping on them. Jacob can also craft, gather and use various items dropped by enemies during fights or found throughout the galaxy. These items grant him temporary bonuses such as health and damage and much more. As you know, in other Mass Effect games, the player is presented with branching storylines and conversation paths in a conversation wheel that displays available dialogue options, and this returns for Mass Effect Galaxy. And we all know that dialogue is obviously a huge part of the Mass Effect games, but in Mass Effect Galaxy, these choices impact how others react to and conversate with Jacob. With dialogue, essentially with the dialogue wheel, you can force or avoid certain situations, sort of like in the original trilogy altogether, but some of the choices don't actually have that impact on the story itself. It's not like Mass Effect 1 and 2, where even the small list of choices with side quests can impact the story in some way. It's not really like that at all. As mentioned earlier, Mass Effect Galaxy's art style differs heavily from the OG trilogy's art direction. While the main trilogy is sort of photorealistic at times, Mass Effect Galaxy has a graphic novel/cartoonish approach to it. This includes 2D animated cutscenes and dialogue where the character portraits will show different expressions to convey how they are feeling. This art style was chosen both to meet the specific graphical limitations of iOS devices, but also separates Mass Effect Galaxy as its own separate entity Galaxy from the original trilogy games. Now, one thing that I didn't know until researching for this video is that Mass Effect Galaxy is actually a tie-in to Mass Effect 2. But how does Mass Effect Galaxy tie into Mass Effect 2, you ask? Well, if a player links their copy of Mass Effect Galaxy to their EA Online account in Mass Effect 2, they will receive the following message: your reward for completing the game is waiting for you in Mass Effect 2. EA confirms that this reward was actually extra dialogue when playing at the beginning and throughout Mass Effect 2. However, this dialogue is completely situational, as the dialogue only occurs when obviously Shepard, Miranda and Jacob are in the party. This is the only way that players are able to experience the additional dialogue. However, sadly, this dialogue is easily missed and doesn't really add much extra to the story of Mass Effect 2 or the game as a whole. In terms of reception, Mass Effect Galaxy received mediocre reviews from video game journalists who criticised the controls and uninspired gameplay essentially. The game, most likely due to these reviews, was then removed from the Apple iOS store and is no longer available for purchase at all. For example, one IGN reviewer scored Mass Effect Galaxy a 5 out of 10, calling the game rushed with clumsy controls and repetitive action. The different art style of the game was noted as one of the game's more positive points, but the animations were weak and the layout of the game was criticised as uninterested and clumsy. Now, I know IGN have got a sort of a reputation with gaming reviews being, they had the whole scandal of their reviews essentially being rigged and things like that. And obviously there's the memes of like 7 out of 10, too much water and things like that. But having a look at other reviews from things like GameStop and other places, it's pretty much the same thing. It's anywhere from a 3 out of 10 all the way up to a 6 out of 10. It's sort of like the ballpark here. So, in conclusion, as to why the game was taken from the iOS store, there's actually not much information on this. I researched this quite a bit, and there's not actually a definitive answer, but in this regard it's actually quite easy to speculate that the game was actually taken off the Apple iOS store due to bad reviews, and the fact that the game isn't actually integral to the overall Mass Effect 2 story at all. However, it does provide some interesting insight into Jacob and Miranda and a few sort of newly introduced characters, but it does include a different take on the Mass Effect lore and universe, and it essentially provides a bit more of a backstory for Jacob as a character. However, all of this was essentially lost in 2012 when EA removed the game from the App Store entirely, as I mentioned earlier, and as to this day you actually can't play the game. There are other means to play the game, I suppose, if you get a hacked device or something like that, but unless you actually purchased the game, it's currently unplayable. So everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video, and tell me in the comments below, did you learn something new? And have you guys actually played Mass Effect Galaxy? I've had no experience with it because up until recently years I've actually never owned an Apple device, so I sadly missed out on this. I mean, back then I wasn't even a Mass Effect fan, so I wouldn't have played it anyway, but tell me in the comments below, did you play Mass Effect Galaxy, and what do you think of the game? Do you think it should be brought back in some way, or do you think that the gameplay and general concepts should be used in a brand new spin-off game going forward? Thank you so much for watching, and for more gaming and Mass Effect news, my name's LockhartQT, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!